I'm happy he's retired. I'm happy it's
Yeah,
over. I'm happy we don't have to deal with this
I
anymore.
agree.
And all I can hope is that next season, when they hang number 12 in the rafters at Gillette Stadium and they bring him back and they unveil his statue in front of the stadium and they name Route 1 Tom Brady Highway and they do all of these ceremonial things, that we can finally bury this fake hatchet that people have created here about Tom Brady and move on.
All right, we are back. That's right. Believe it or not, we haven't even hit the Super Bowl yet. And Evan Lazar is back talking New England Patriots football and Pat's Probe. So, we promised we'd be back talking about the Patriots 2022 offseason. Evan, I just didn't think it would be this quick.
I know. Never a dull moment. It's great for us, right? We always have something to talk about. We always
Yes.
have something to write about, which is a lot of fun. I wish that in some ways the discourse and the attention was in different areas than what it's been here locally and on my Twitter feed and things of the nature. But it's a really interesting time to be a Patriots fan. Let me put it to you that
All
way.
right. Well, before we get into all that, I just want to remind everybody you can check out our new Patreon page at patreon.com/PrimeSN. That's for all of our premium content. And we've already got some of our programs up there. And I've already started to post my NFL draft rankings, and they're all done. So I'm just going to spit them out every day, every position. I'll get into a mock draft soon as well. Patreon.com/PrimeSN. You can also find the rankings on our Lads Football Network page at ourlads.com. So, first of all, then, I tell you what, we were scheduled to do this anyway for Josh McDaniels reasons, but
Right.
it perfectly fell in tune with Tom Brady. So, and I haven't had time to go into everything that you've been dealing with in the last 24 hours, and I can understand your end. For me, I felt why waste my time when I could talk to you? So, what's going on here? What's all the disrespect I'm assuming that's out there regarding Tom Brady and his anti-Patriots feelings?
Oh yeah, I think the biggest thing that fans feel disrespected. That's the word to use. Fans feel disrespected that Tom Brady in his 9 slide retirement post on Instagram and Twitter did not mention the Patriots, Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, Patriots fans, not a single time in the entire post. Now, the way that I initially read it is that 2 years ago, when Tom Brady left New England to go to Tampa Bay, he released a series of posts of Instagram, social media posts about his time in New England, how much he loves the Patriots, how much he loves the Patriots organization, how much he loves the Patriots fans. I think the exact caption that was on the original post was "Forever a Patriot," right? And all these types of things. Then he goes and does Man in the Arena with ESPN, which is a 10 part documentary series about his time with the Patriots. No mention of the word Tampa Bay or Buccaneers anywhere in the first 10 episodes of Man in the Arena, where he goes from the Tuck rule to his last season in New England, talking about all the great memories, all the great moments, his relationship with Bill Belichick, his relationship with the fans and his Patriots teammates. And because he did not mention the Patriots in this retirement post, people feel slighted and disrespected by it. And quite frankly, I think the biggest thing is I'm not trying to tell people how to feel. You can feel however you want to feel. If you want to feel snubbed, if you want to feel disrespected and feel snubbed. The disappointment that I have, Greg, is that when Tom Brady retired, my hope was that we could talk about 28-3 and the 10-point comeback against Seattle and the Tuck rule and Super Bowl 36 and 2007 Patriots and 2018 Patriots and 2016 Patriots and all these great moments and teams and times and celebrate and reminisce the career of Tom Brady, but instead we're talking about disrespect in a social media post.
Well,
And
that's today? Isn't that what we're dealing
that's
with?
today's society in a nutshell. And everything that we do, we could publish a 10-part Tom Brady, love fest on our channels, and it would not get as many clicks as me yelling about Tom Brady not putting the Patriots in his retirement post. And that's everything that is wrong with the media coverage. And quite frankly, for the last 2 seasons, it has been insufferable up here. It has been absolutely insufferable, from people pitting Brady against Belichick, from people lamenting the fact that Tom Brady was playing in Tampa Bay and chastising the organization for how bad of a move it was to let him leave in the first place, to people on our airwaves here in Boston. I'm not going to name names, but people on our airwaves here in Boston saying that they are now Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans and not Patriots fans anymore. Yeah. We have dealt with this for 2 years since Brady left for Tampa Bay. And my last point on this, I'm happy he's retired. I'm happy it's over.
Yeah.
I'm happy we don't have to deal with this anymore.
I agree.
And all I can hope is that next season, when they hang number 12 in the rafters at Gillette Stadium and they bring him back and they unveil his statue in front of the stadium and they name Route 1 Tom Brady Highway and they do all of these ceremonial things, that we can finally bury this fake hatchet that people have created here about Tom Brady and move on from this and go back to remembering him like Larry Bird is remembered here, like David Ortiz is remembered here, like Bill Russell's remembered, Bobby Orr, and all the great Boston athletes. That's Tom Brady should be remembered like that and then some. It should be that times 10 for how great of a Boston athlete he was. And instead, here we are talking about this kind of stuff. And that is just really sad and disappointing. That's the disappointing part to me, not that Tom Brady didn't mention us in the social media post.
Well, and I think we both are smart enough to figure that once we get to that point that you're talking about, all of this is going to be forgotten.
Right.
Nobody's going to bring that stuff up then. Matter of fact, that's going to be pretty much the end of it. Even if it does continue, which I'm not sure how much longer it does continue. I just saw something. Didn't I just see something about him tweeting something out about?
Yeah, he quote tweeted Robert Kraft's statement about his retirement and said, "I'll always love you, Pats Nation."
Yeah, so he's already starting to.
He's already starting to try to play a little bit of damage control. Look, it's his self-inflicted. He should have mentioned the Patriots in the post.
Agreed.
All of that is true, but that's not my point. And I think that's where people are getting into feuds with me, is because they're missing that my overarching point here has nothing to do with if Tom Brady did right or wrong. Tom Brady was in the wrong for not mentioning the Patriots. But the point is that one social media post should not now go ahead and define anything about Tom Brady's legacy here in Boston. And we all need to grow up and get over it. That he didn't mention you. I'm sorry that he did not mention you. I'm sorry he did not pat you on the back, Patriots Nation, and say thank you for your dedication and for your love and your support and all that kind of stuff like he should have. But it doesn't need to be about this. It does not need to be about this. And the only thing that really can make this go away at this point, I think, because I think there will always be, for some Patriots fans, unless they do this thing correctly in his retirement when it comes to the jersey retirements and all the ceremonial type of stuff, unless they nail that and really hit it out of the park, I think a lot of Patriots fans are always going to feel a little bit of bitter taste in their mouth about the way it ended and about the way that he went out. And that is just really, really, that stinks. It stinks. There's no other way to put it. I mentioned all those other great athletes, or didn't finish his career with the Bruins, right? I mean, he went on to Chicago. And
nobody remembers
other
that.
Athletes, right.
Just like nobody's going to remember.
Went to Kansas City, right? Peyton went to Denver. Yeah. I mean, this is not the first athlete to finish his career someplace else. And yet we as Boston Knights are so petty about this kind of stuff. And yeah, we care a lot. And yeah, that's part of the reason. But it's just, I don't know. I think it's a bunch of babies whining about this, quite
Well,
frankly.
do you notice a specific age range of the ones that are more upset?
I wish I did, but I think it's a lot of. I just got off the phone with my dad. He watched our live stream earlier in the day after his official announcement, and he's yelling at me, Evan, why? What are you talking about? He snubbed us. What do you mean? This is terrible. All this kind of stuff. So he's 60. And I see it from 60 to 16. So I think everybody is a little bit mad at Tom Brady right now here in the region. And I get it. I fully get it. I think that's what I really want to hammer home here. I am not saying you shouldn't be mad. I am not telling you how to feel. I am telling you that I would much rather be talking about this and having you ask me, Greg, what are your favorite Tom Brady memories? What are your favorite Tom Brady moments?
Yeah.
What are your favorite Tom Brady games? And instead, we're talking about social media. And you're right, this is everything that is wrong with society in 2022. There is no nuance, there is no next level thinking. It's all surface level, did he or didn't he? And it's sad. It's sad.
And you know what it is too is I think that unfortunately, because politics has really defined our lives, and it's so unfortunate because it's given us this. Well, we have to pick sides, and
Right.
we have never been maybe since it's probably been a couple hundred years since we have this much animosity towards one side or another, and you better be on one side. And I think that's how we're
Right.
feeling about everything in life. And so we have to either like or not like what Tom Brady is doing here. This is
Right.
either good or bad, when that's just ridiculous. I mean, and you can imagine how other fan bases, and I'll just take it from my own. My team has not won a Super Bowl since I was a few months old. So I don't really remember that. So I could just imagine if I had 20 years of winning division titles and being in the postseason and 6 Super Bowls and all that kind of stuff, championships, let alone how many you get there, and feeling at the end of all of that I'm going to have a problem with the guy that was responsible for it. I mean, it's hard for me to fathom that.
I think that people like you, Greg, that can envy the Patriots' success, or even a lot of people, I'm not saying you particularly, but a lot of people are mad that they have not been able to experience, and think that we are watching. If you were watching us from Buffalo, from New York, from wherever, and looking at this, you would say typical Patriots fans, right? It's never good enough. It's never enough. What more could that man possibly do for this franchise? And I don't think that people recognize, and I fully recognize what Tom Brady has meant, not only to me personally in terms of my fandom of the team, but also in terms of my career and in terms of my direction in life in general. The fact is, if Tom Brady was not the quarterback of my hometown team, I am not doing this for a profession. I don't fall in love with football in the same vein that I fell in love with it
Great
now.
point.
So, in so many different ways, Brady has awakened football in this town to a point where I would say that football is now king in Boston. And if you told my father that, or you told my grandfather that 30 years ago,
Oh, forget it.
That the Patriots would be bigger than the Red Sox, they would laugh in your face.
Or even the Celtics.
Right. They would say there is no way in hell that the Patriots are the number one show in town 30 years from now. And all of that was made possible by Tom Brady. And yet, because he didn't mention you in a social media post on his retirement day, we are going to drag him through the mud for it. It's incomprehensible to me. I can't put it into words. It's just outrageous. Absolutely outrageous.
Did you think that the reaction would have been how much worse would the reaction have been, or how much better would the reaction have been if he would have acknowledged the Patriots? Would it have been that much of a difference? We wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yes, I think if he puts one line at
That was it.
At the end of that 9-page posting, all he had to say was, and of course, to Patriots Nation, to Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick and the entire Patriots organization, I'll never forget you and what you did for me for 20 seasons, and thank you, and I love you all, Tom. I think that none of this happens.
And let's keep in mind, this is a social media post.
Yeah.
This is not Tom Brady standing at the Hall of Fame with his speech that he's worked on for a month or for years.
Right.
Forgetting to say anything about the Patriots or going in enshrined with Tampa Bay colors.
Right.
That's it's a social media post.
They want so much out of him. They want him to retire a Patriot. They want him
We all know that's going to happen.
They want him to sign the one-day contract and retire a Patriot.
Oh, they want that whole thing. The whole show. Yeah.
Despite the fact that he's under contract with Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
So all of the logistics aside, and the fact is that there are logistics involved here with him signing a one-day contract with the Patriots, because if he decides to unretire at some point, then he's no longer property of, I shouldn't say that.
Right.
He's no longer under contract with Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they give up his contractual control. So if he decides that, like Rob Gronkowski did, that all he needed was an off season and a year off to recharge and reset and spend some time with his family and scratch some other itches, but he actually wants to come back because, quite frankly, he threw for 5,000 yards and might be the MVP, so he very well can still play. He's no longer a Buck. He's a free agent. So why would Tampa Bay want him to do that? No. Why would they let him do that?
No, never gonna happen.
That's way too nuanced for anybody in Patriot land to wrap their heads around. That the one-day contract thing is a risk for the Buccaneers, a gigantic one, especially with the player as competitive and as good as Tom Brady. So all that nuance aside, all they were looking for was a sentence at the end. They didn't get it. They're not going to get the one-day contract. They're not going to get the press conference at Gillette Stadium with him and Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft and them, reminiscing and everybody being just like when the one that I can most regularly remember in my head is when Jason Witten retired. And Jerry Jones and Jason Garrett and everybody down in Dallas, they all brought him back, right? Because he had moved on to the Raiders and to Monday Night Football and to other things. That retirement, that's not going to happen. I'm not old enough. I don't remember if Joe Montana went back to San Francisco and did his retirement press conference there or not.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I know Peyton Manning did his in Denver. And I don't see anybody in Indianapolis crying about it, right?
That's true.
Yeah, so I just think that this is...
But then again, there wasn't social media like there is now.
Right.
You never know.
Right. So unless I truly feel that the only way that Patriots fans are going to be satisfied with Brady is if he comes back, he does a retirement press conference or a retirement send-off of some sort here in New England and says all of the things that they want him to say. And the one comparison, and I'm lucky enough to not be from a divorced family, but the one comparison that everybody keeps on bringing it back to that I think makes the most sense is that they want mom and dad to get back together, right? They want mom and dad. We are the kids, and we want mom and dad to get back together, and mom and dad are never getting back together.
No, it's not happening.
Right? The bridge is burned. They are never getting back together. So the best thing that you can hope for is that he shows up to your graduation, which hopefully will mean that he, will have very soon the jersey retirements and the celebrations and all that kind of stuff. But he is not signing a one-day contract. He's not going on some press tour in New England about how much he loves the Patriots and all this kind of stuff.
Nope.
He's done with it. He's done with it. He's written that chapter and he's closed that book.
Yeah, it's and he is that one player too that I could see that would retire and then take a year off and then, hey, I'm coming back. He would be that guy. Because not 100%. Many besides Gronk. I don't even remember. I mean, Brett Favre.
Brett Favre did it sort of, right? And those are that's what I'm saying about the whole 1-day contract thing is if he does, Tampa Bay would be absolute lunatics to
Yeah.
release him from his contract. Absolutely outside their minds because there is a chance that he will come back. I'm not saying it's a high probability, but something tells me that that guy might wake up one morning and
Yeah, I
just be
know.
like, you know what? I'm coming back.
Yeah.
The body feels good. I feel good. I feel rejuvenated. My head's in the right place for it. I want to give it one more run. Why? I don't know. Just because I'm a crazy person. But I want to give it one more run. And then Tampa Bay is sitting there and saying, "Well, he's a free agent. He's not ours anymore." So it just.
Well, you know what's going
I
to
don't know
happen,
if he can stand.
because this is going to go on for a couple of years anyway, is going to
Right.
be he's retired, and the Patriots, we just saw it with Phillip Rivers. The
Right.
Patriots, if anything happens to Mac Jones at the end of the season, and there's a couple of games left, and the Patriots are in first place, the first story that's going to come out is do you think Brady's going to come out of retirement and want to play for the Pats
Right.
one last time? So, of course, as long as Tampa Bay owns his rights and they're willing to work out a deal with the Patriots,
Right.
then it makes sense. But you know that's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen.
It
Hopefully,
stinks.
Mac Jones doesn't get hurt.
It stinks that this is what we have to talk about. It stinks that we can't just be bigger people and be adults about the situation and not get hurt by petty things like this. But this is the world we live in now, and that's all it is.
Yeah, and but I agree with you. I am glad that it is kind of over. I think it was.
I'm so glad it's over.
Starting to get to me, and it's weird to say it because he's leaving at the top of his game, which is great. Right. But it's almost like, man, it's like I see. Here's one of the reasons why. For me, because I think we're already seeing the effects in these playoffs. Brady's getting up there; he's now gone. Breeze is gone. Manning is gone. All the coaches that have won championships. Belichick, okay, he'll be back, but it's now a lot of these coaches that have won championships or quarterbacks that have won championships aren't around anymore, and so it's wild, wild west in the playoffs, and anything can happen, and I love that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and this new generation of quarterback that's coming up, especially more so, I would say, on the AFC side of things is where a lot of these guys are. But regardless, just across the entire league, obviously you have one of them in the Super Bowl this year with Joe Burrow, and you have Patrick Mahomes in the championship game, and Josh Allen in the divisional round against Kansas City, and Mac Jones, and Justin Herbert, of course, with the Chargers, and Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. I mean, the list goes on of all these great next generation quarterbacks, and now we get to finally see some of these guys take over the league. And maybe Joe Burrow is already starting to do that, and maybe this is just the start of a little Burrow run that we get. Or maybe Patrick Mahomes is not going anywhere, so he's going to continue to knock on the door every single season as well. And yeah, it's a little bit more wide open. I think that's definitely a little bit more fun. And Father Time's undefeated. It comes for everybody, even Tom Brady. And he didn't decline physically, but I think mentally he's tuckered out. I think the wear and tear of doing it for 22 years and that what he needed to put into it, I think, was the biggest thing in terms of his preparation in the offseason and the work that he needed to put into his body to continue to play at this age. I think just got to be, what am I doing this for?
Yeah.
Why am I breaking myself over this? I got 7 Super Bowl championships. What more could I possibly want out of this game? So yeah, no more Drew Brees, no more Roethlisberger, no more Brady, no more Rivers, no more that whole generation, the early 2000s guys that came in that generation of the league are all now gone, and now it's time for the young guns to step up, and I think that will be a lot of fun. I think some of them are you never know. None of them are going to be Brady. Sure. Probably none of them will be Manning. But maybe some of these guys could be a Roethlisberger, or could be a Rivers, or those guys are not these never to be seen again level quarterbacks. Sure. So I think it'll be fun. Yeah. I agree with that.
And look, I'll be saying this and I haven't done a Jet show in a while, but when I do, when we get into the off season, one of the first things I'm going to talk about is the hope of what Joe Burrow has done and what this Bengals team has done this year to organizations like the Jets. Because talent-wise, the only difference is Joe Burrow.
Right.
And you're talking about 125 to 1 shot to win the Super Bowl. So as a fan, you're going to have the hope that can Zach Wilson, can he be that good?
Sure.
Maybe he could. You don't know.
Yeah.
He was drafted that high to be that good.
I can certainly tell you that I think Mac Jones could be that good.
There you go.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you've got guys, Oregon. Well, again, the comparison Patriots, the Jets, but you're going to have those organizations as bad as the Jets that are going to have that kind of hope. And it just shows you, too, what difference having a quarterback is in the NFL. And it's just so much different than any other sport, including the NBA, because in the NBA, you still have to have a 2 and a 3 superstar nowadays. Whereas in football, you have a really elite quarterback. It's going to take you a long way. So.
Yeah, the Bengals turnaround. I think it's pretty much unprecedented, honestly, in the league to have a team with a second-year quarterback that's supposed to just be a nice story in a rebuilding year, make it this far, make it to a Super Bowl. I can't. The Patriots did it in Brady's first year as the starter, his second year in the league, and Belichick's second year in New England, but they had a lot of carryover players from the Parcells Patriots teams that made the Super Bowl and were competitive in the 90s. Ty Law, Teddy Bruschi, Lawyer Malloy, Willie McGinnis, all those guys were already here. So they put Richard Seymour into that mix. They obviously put a young Tom Brady into that mix, and they win a Super Bowl. But a lot of the roots and the foundation of that 2001 team had already been laid before those two had gotten there. So with the Bengals, this is from nothing.
No.
This is from ashes.
Yeah.
This is from absolute nothingness. And I remember a couple years ago, not to bring up a Patriots scandal, but when they got fined for the taping and the press box thing with Cincinnati, the running joke then about the Bengals was the Bengals are so bad. Why would the Patriots tape their sideline?
Sure.
What's even the point? Like, they can beat the Bengals with two hands tied behind their back. Why would they cheat to beat the Bengals? And that was just 2 years ago.
No,
and now we're in a point where they're in the Super Bowl. This is the most, in my lifetime, the Bengals are easily the most improbable Super Bowl team that I have seen.
But the good thing is that you at least know it's different from like Humphreys and the Chargers being in the Super Bowl that year, or even Atlanta. Who was their quarterback that year that they played Denver and Elway? It was,
the Dirty Birds.
Yeah.
I
can't even remember. It was some bad veteran guy who I can't even remember. This is a lot different, because they've got now a guy who I believe, if you're going to look at any young quarterback in the NFL today that can in any way, shape, or form emulate a little bit of Tom Brady, the it factor, it's Burrow. Right. It's what he did at LSU, and it's what you felt all along of why I felt he was going to be a really good pro, is that he's got that ability to come up big in big games, and it's very hard to do, especially when you do it in college, which is, to win a championship in college and then to come right away 2 years later and potentially win a Super Bowl, that's also unheard of.
Yeah, I believe the stat is that no quarterback, I don't know how many quarterbacks in general, but it's been a long time since a quarterback's won a national championship and won a Super Bowl just in their careers.
Yeah.
Period. Mm-hmm. And he's knocking on the door, doing it in year 2. And I think what you hit on with Burrow, I've compared Mac Jones in terms of Mac Jones could potentially develop into what Joe Burrow is down the line. He's obviously not there now, but from a skill set perspective, I don't think that they're that far off from the way that they play the game. But the thing that you identified with Joe Burrow's it factor and his swagger and his confidence, Mac doesn't have that yet, and he's a rookie. So obviously, or was a rookie. So obviously that comes with a little bit more experience, a little bit more time. And I don't necessarily think Joe Burrow's it factor was all that much of a factor in his rookie season. No. I think at times he looked like he was seeing ghosts and he was overwhelmed like any other rookie would. So Mac does have, and this goes back to his days at Alabama, where Nick Saban even talked about it openly and tried to coach it out of him. Nick Saban called it a John McEnroe complex, where you could know just by Mac Jones's body language, by the way he was carrying himself, by the look on his face and his facial and physical expressions, if he completed a pass or not. Because when he threw a touchdown, he's dancing around, and when he throws an incomplete pass, he's kicking the dirt and he's stomping his feet and he's, getting all animated and angry at himself. Burrow doesn't do that. And Brady never did that. Brady was always cool, calm Tom all the time. Whether it was a pick six in a playoff game or it was an 80-yard touchdown, the next play was always the same guy. And that sort of
until
ability
the Super Bowl.
to not, yeah, that sort of ability to not let it snowball on you.
Yep.
Is really an important quality for a quarterback, and got to have a short memory for that position. I think Mac still wallows in it a little bit sometimes, and that's maybe one thing that Joe Burrow has currently that's not, you can't, I don't know if you can necessarily develop that skill. Some guys just have that and some guys don't. And so that might be the one thing that I would point at to say, if Mac Jones gets down 21-3 in a playoff game, does he still have the confidence to bring the Patriots back?
Well, here's the difference,
Burrow did.
Is that Mac will have more confidence when he starts having the type of receivers Burrow has.
Sure.
And we talked about it pretty much all season, is that Mac just doesn't have that. And it just wasn't there. It was never going to be there this season. So that is, look, there's no doubt. Quarterback, elite, always important, but he has to have help. And Burrow had help. It wasn't just Chase. Higgins came out with some huge catches. They had the running game, which not a lot of other quarterbacks have the luxury of. So that's the kind of thing that also. And by the way, Hendrickson, basically for Lawson goes to the Jets, tears his ACL. Hendrickson is healthy. That is a smart decision, and then you get a little lucky, but you have to get lucky with injuries as well in the NFL. They didn't get lucky last year. They signed DJ Reader. He gets hurt the entire year. What does he do this year? He's healthy the whole year. So you have to have everything also falling into place perfectly, and then they still barely got to the Super Bowl, and it just shows you how hard it is.
Yeah, and the Patriots have had playmakers on Jamar Chase's level in the past, right? They've had Rob Gronkowski, they've had Randy Moss, they've had Prime Edelman and Prime Welker, those type of guys. The one guy that I would say that they have never been able to identify and bring in here is the T. Higgins type, right? The outside receiver, the number 2 guy who's got size but still has fluidity to be able to get open and be able to run routes.
Hell of a number 2.
It's that watching what T. Higgins did against the Chiefs was, to me, such a great example of the Patriots have never been able to properly scout, identify, draft that 6'3", 6'2" receiver that can still move, that can still get in and out of a break, that can still go over the middle and use his body and his catch radius between the numbers and on the outside. And that, watching him play in that championship game, definitely even a T. Higgins type for the Patriots would do Mac Jones so much wonders, because of the way that he can just make plays and
he makes the 3rd and 5 catch when they're down 21-3.
Yeah.
Which if he doesn't make that catch over the middle, they got to punt the ball. And then he makes the big catch that puts – as soon as he made that catch in overtime, that put him at the 35. With McPherson, the way he's been kicking, you felt that's it. Now they're in field goal range, and he makes that catch too. So he had but you're right. That's the thing about what we've talked about the Patriots all season long, and they have to, whether it's free agency or the draft, they've got to give him at least the starting point. So you don't have to be all in one off season, but you got to start somewhere and give him a bona fide number 1 guy.
Yeah, we have a reporter at CLNS, Trags, who covers the Bengals now. He covered the Patriots for 2-3 decades for us, and he's a huge Bengals fan, grew up in Cincinnati, went home a couple of years ago and started covering the Bengals. And he loves to compare this Bengals team to the 0-1 Patriots because of a lot of the sort of overlaps there. The one thing that I'm not fully there yet for Trags. Sorry, Trags. But the one thing that I will say, the way that Evan McPherson is kicking right now reminds me so much of Adam Vinatieri, where as soon as you were over the 50, you were like, all right, we won the game.
Yeah.
Like we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. Let's get to the 35 and let's get Adam out here and we'll be fine. And I'm watching the end of that game against the Chiefs, and I'm thinking to myself, once they get inside the 30, I'm like, just kick it. Like he's not gonna miss. Like there's no way he's gonna miss. Like all the more likely thing to happen is that somebody fumbles or somebody
holding. You go
right.
10 yards further.
Some disaster happens that puts you out of field goal range or something like that. Because this kid, once you cross over the 40-yard line and he's within range, he's not missing.
Yeah.
So get him out there. And that did give me some Adam Vinatieri vibes for sure.
And that is a big edge. That is the big edge that the Bengals are going to have in Super Bowl, is that if you know it's going to come down to kicks,
right?
You know the Bengals are going to be the team to beat. All right, so the Patriots have the 21st pick in the draft, so we'll have a lot more time in the coming months to talk about that. First is going to be free agency. We already talked on the last show about the top free agents. Jackson, by the way, do you think Jackson will be franchised?
I do. I think that they just don't really have very many options with that. You can't let them walk for nothing. You just can't. You can't let that happen, especially with the way that they already have so many needs and so many holes on the defensive side of the football. That if you open up another hole by taking Jackson out of the secondary, you've got a lot of holes to plug and not as many resources as what you had this time last season to be able to piece it all together. You don't have $75 million in cap space and a whole slew of draft picks, and you have a finite amount of resources this time around. So I just don't see, business wise, it just doesn't make any sense to do anything but franchise JC.
How old is he?
26, 27. So he's right in the prime of his career, and he's not Stephon Gilmore. He's not Darrelle Revis. Sure. I think he's more Asante Samuel than either one of those guys. But he's still a very, very good corner that should be here for the long term.
Yeah, almost the same situation where, because I remember talking about this with the Jets and Marcus May, and what do you do with him before the injury? And it was like, well, look, all you have to do is tag him.
Right.
Because you can tag him the second year.
Right.
And by the time he gets to that third year, he's already going to be at an age where it's up to you. You can go, well, let some other team sign him for 5 years and $100 million, because I think he's pretty much on the decline of his career. So, but Jackson's a little bit younger, but they could still lock him up for a couple of years. All they have to do is franchise him. Trent Brown, they got to bring him back, right?
So that's going to be an interesting one. Whatever happens with Isaiah Wynn, I think is really going to dictate.
You think it's either or?
With the whole line. Isaiah Wynn's making $10.5 million next year on his 5th-year option, all guaranteed because of the way the contract is structured with the rookie deal. So he has a $10.4 million cap hit. And if the Patriots start paying both tackles a lot of money, and then you got to pay J.C. Jackson, the money starts to spread thin really, really quickly if you start to do that. So my feeling on it is that the Patriots are going to try to shop Isaiah Wynn this offseason. 1 year of Isaiah Wynn, who, when healthy, is a starting caliber tackle in the NFL. $10.5 million is not a terrible price tag for that level of play. And you get something back in return from the Patriots side of things. Maybe you start Trent Brown next year at left tackle, draft your left tackle of the future with the pick you get back for Isaiah Wynn, and the machine keeps chugging along, as they say. So that's the big thing with the tackle dominoes is, do they end up finding a trade partner? Do they end up finding good value for a guy like Isaiah Wynn? Because I think I have a tough time with them paying Trent and Isaiah Wynn $10+ million next year. Just the way that they have their other needs and all this kind of stuff, you just would like to see the salary cap spread out a little bit better.
And then really that's it as far as the top guys, because then you're talking about, okay, maybe you bring McCourty back. That's not going to be very expensive. Right. And then some of the other role guys like James White, Nick Folk. I mean, you're probably going to bring him back another year. Just give him something
the
cheap. Big
one is, Dante Hightower is also a free agent.
Hightower and Collins. Which one? Collins preferably, or Hightower?
I don't know. Look, I think Collins played better last year than Hightower, just strictly basing it off of the tape. I think Collins was a better linebacker for the Patriots. Hightower means so much to them from a leadership, mental football IQ standpoint. I mean, that's a guy. I don't think he will because I don't know if he has the. I don't know if he cares enough to actually be a coach someday, but I think that he could be a guy that could be a coach. I think that he knows the system and knows the game that well, especially for what the Patriots like to do. That he's the green dot guy, right? He's the guy that calls all the plays. He's the guy that gets everybody in order. So there's something to be said for that. He certainly lost a step, maybe 2 steps, since his prime days, but he's still an effective player at what he does if you keep him in the role that he belongs in, and he's still that field general that they want him to be, but they need to get younger at that position. I'm not going to say they need to get faster, but they need to get faster. Everybody, they need a fast linebacker. Oh, they need Fred Warner. They need somebody like that. They need somebody that's younger and more youthful and more explosive. Yeah. Whether that means that they go completely away from their bigger linebacker mold or not remains to be seen.
Yeah, well, and they've tried that the last few years. They just haven't hit it.
Well, that's the other thing that I say about it is if they're not going to play Josh Uche and they're not going to play Chase Winovich and they're not going to play Ronnie Perkins and they're not going to we'll see when Cam McGrone comes back, but he's the 5th round pick that tore his ACL in Michigan. Everybody's really high on him here. If they're not going to play these undersized, faster linebackers because they don't fit the scheme, then what's the point of drafting another one in the top 50 that you're just not going to play? That's the thing is everybody can look here and sit here and conveniently say that the Patriots need more speed and more athleticism at linebacker, but does Bill think that? Does Bill think that that's the best player for his defense? Yeah. Is Bill going to actually put that guy on the field and give that guy a full-time role? If he's not, then don't waste your asset. Don't waste a 1st-round pick on Devin Lloyd if you're not going to play Devin Lloyd.
Well, that is the difference, is that they haven't really spent it on a premium pick. It's always the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round guys. Yeah. I mean, and that's what happens sometimes when you keep shooting for those types of players in the later rounds. It's harder to find the right guy. So sometimes you just have to, if it's that important to your defense, you got to draft him earlier.
Yeah, and look, I've been lukewarm on Devin Lloyd for the Patriots. He's a great prospect, but for the Patriots, he doesn't like contact. He doesn't want to take on a puller. He doesn't want to step into a run gap and kind of deal with the contact of the trenches, right? He's not Hightower. He's not Jawan Bentley. No. He's not one of these hard-hitting Mike linebackers. You put him in the right direction, you point him in a direction, and he's unblocked to the ball carrier. He's got some flashy hit sticks on tape, right? Like old school, just lay guys out. He's great in coverage, but he belongs to me in a Seattle style, San Francisco style, Buffalo style, Jets now style, obviously with Saleh, that type of scheme, a zone heavy scheme with a one gapping D line, guys on the line that are going to penetrate and make plays behind the line of scrimmage, and he's just going to be free to be an athlete everywhere. The Patriots don't want that player. That's not the Patriots mold. That's not what the Patriots are looking for. They're much more looking for a guy like Beavers from Cincinnati who can knock some heads, who can come downhill, who can plug gaps and fill in the run game. And it drives Patriots fans crazy because Beavers is 250 pounds and he's slower and he's not the same athlete as these other guys are, but that's their type of linebacker. So that's why I tweeted out that I think Beavers is a great fit for them. Everybody, the angry mob came for me on Twitter and said how slow he is and he's not.
Yeah, but you don't have to take him in the 1st round.
Right. But I if I had to guess who the linebacker would be that the Patriots would identify as their guy, a guy like Beavers is the guy that I think that they would want. I also think maybe Quay Walker from Georgia is a potential fit for them at linebacker too, but I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it that they're going to draft a Devin Lloyd, that they're going to draft a Nakobe Dean, that they're going to draft one of these new age, fast, smaller Matt Milano, Fred Warner, those types of guys.
By the way, I don't think they're going to be able to get either of those two. I think those two guys are going to go before 21.
It would probably be a blessing in disguise, honestly, because neither one of those guys are a great fit in Belichick's defense. And I can see it now. They had draft Evan Lloyd at 21. The reaction after the pick, all Patriots fans are going to be jumping on tables and celebrating in the streets. And then he's going to play his rookie season, and he's going to get washed out by pullers, and he's going to get killed by climbers to the second level, and he's not going to be a good fit for what they do. And then everybody's going to be like, why did Bill draft this guy in the first round?
He won't do that. Yeah, he won't do that. He's not going to draft someone. He's not going to do, and not in the first round if he doesn't feel that the guy's the right fit. He should know that. I mean, he does. Yeah. I mean, and by the way, I think we both would agree that in the first round, more than likely, again, it's going to be either cornerback or wide receiver. That's where it has to be.
The cornerback position's tough because Roger McCreary just measured in at the Senior Bowl yesterday with 29-inch arms. And I know that this sounds crazy, but in draft land, 29-inch arms for a cornerback is scratch that guy off in the first round. You don't draft short-arm cornerbacks in the first round. It just doesn't happen.
It just shows you how important it is to wait until they get. That's why even when I was putting my rankings together, I had to put into the top of the report. My rankings will change as soon as we get to the All-Star games and the Combine, because you got to find out about all this kind of stuff, especially the 40 times.
Yeah, and I really like McCreary's tape at Auburn this past year.
It's just that maybe he's not a first-round guy now, but that's okay. It doesn't mean he won't fit into an NFL backfield. Look at J.C. Jackson. He wasn't a first-round guy.
Right. And I thought the combination of JC playing some of the bigger guys on the outside and McCreary playing some of the quicker guys, maybe off the line as a shadow or a slot shadow or something like that, that would work out really well for them. But 29-inch arms, not at 21. That's out, right? He's a second round guy.
And there are some good corners too. And by the way, the Patriots are in that spot in that area of the draft where there's going to be at least one player that will drop.
Right.
It happens every year. And it's going to happen no matter what. But what position will it be? Will it be a position that the Patriots are looking for? And considering there are a lot of corners and a lot of receivers, I think the Patriots are going to be in a really good spot either way. Somebody is going to sit there. Somebody's going to be there, a really talented wide receiver or a really talented corner, that they can decide whether or not one of those guys fits on their team.
Yeah, I look at the board and everybody, whenever I talk about these draft guys at the top of the draft, the number one thing people said, oh, that guy's not going to be available. That guy's going to be off the board. It's like, not everybody can be off the board. Like somebody is going to be available.
Yeah.
And I look at their need at wide receiver, and the two guys that I think of immediately are CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. Lamb, I think, lasted till 19, I think it was, with Dallas. And I'm 99% sure that Justin Jefferson was the 21st pick in the draft his year. So when there's all this talent, somebody has to fall, right? And whether that is a receiver, a corner, whether that's Jameson Williams or it's Chris Olave or whatever, somebody is available to the Patriots that is going to be available there to the Patriots at the top of the draft at a position of need. That's a talented guy if they just sit back and let it happen. Now, do I think that there is a chance this year? I do think that there is a chance that we'll see another aggressive trade up at some point in the draft from Bill Belichick. Last year, it was Christian Barmore, right? They traded up in the second round to grab Barmore. Maybe it's more like that than versus trading up in the first round. But I think that what they've identified over specifically last year, but I would say over the last two drafts, is that they don't need the Jacoby Myerses right now. They don't need the Kendrick Bournes. They need a stud. They need a number one guy. And I think that they've been a little bit more aggressive in the draft process with chasing blue chip talent, with not sitting back and just taking the Kyle Duggars or sitting back and taking the Wins and the Michelles. And they've really looked at it and said, or the N'Keal Harris, and they've said, Christian Barmore is the best D tackle in the draft. This guy's going to be a really good player. Let's go and get him. And I hope that they continue to have that kind of mentality with this year's draft.
And before I move on, I always look at the example of T.J. Watt, because I remember for forever as a Jet fan, I mean, you're always looking for that 3-4 edge rusher, that next guy. But the Jets were so bad that they were getting those picks so early that a guy like Watt wasn't really that. He was more of a mid middle of the pack guy in the first round. So the Steelers get the benefit of being able to sit there and get a guy as good as that, because nobody was going to pick him in the top 5 or whatever the Jets were at that point. And yet he turns out to be probably the best player in the draft. Yeah. And you needed a guy like that. How come you couldn't get him? So it's just the way that it goes in the draft. There are going to be those guys that are going to slip, and sometimes they end up. A lot of times they end up better than the guys that are drafted ahead of them. It just matters how fortunate you are in this draft lottery that we have every year on whether or not these guys are going to be available. Because I'll tell you, the one guy that could very well be that guy is Cam Thomas. I love Cam Thomas. I have him in the top 10 as far as best players in the draft. That's how much I love Cam Thomas. Will he be drafted in the top 10? Probably not. But somebody's going to pick him outside in the top 15, top 20, and maybe in a couple of years they're going to regret, well, why didn't I pick him when I had a top 5 pick? So, it's going to happen. Okay.
Always happens.
Let's wrap up with Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. And
yes.
So interesting that we talked about if Josh McDaniels was ever going to leave, he was going to leave because he was going to follow his John Carroll ex-teammate, Nick Caserio. And that made a lot of sense. And who knows when or where, but that's probably going to be it's the only way Josh McDaniels is going to leave. And lo and behold, Josh McDaniels leaves New England and follows his ex-John Carroll teammate, who's not Nick Caserio. So how crazy was that? Because as soon as I heard the news and the rumors, I hearkened back to our conversations, and I was like, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think that's the number one thing. I think a lot of people are getting too caught up in the Raiders of this, right? Of Mark Davis and the Raiders roster and all the things that maybe don't make as much sense about this. This is 110% about Josh McDaniels being aligned with the general manager and them being a package deal where he feels comfortable with the football operations hierarchy in Las Vegas. He knows that him and Ziegler are going to have the same vision. He knows that they can communicate and talk through these things and these difficult decisions, and they are going to be a team that they're going to be able to assemble together and put together. And I think that is the number one thing that he was looking for was, I don't want to end up like Brian Flores, where because the ownership and the general manager and I were at odds, I end up losing the power struggle and being the odd man out. I don't want to end up like Bill O'Brien. I don't want to end up like these guys that I've seen, Matt Patricia, where it doesn't align perfectly from that standpoint. So to have that organizational stability, I guess is the word, I think was the biggest reason why he wanted to take this job or was willing to take this job. The other thing that we're hearing here in Boston a whole lot about is that nobody knows when Bill Belichick is going to call it quits. And as of right now, there's really no sign of Bill slowing down. Wow. So you can't just sit around and wait if you're Josh McDaniels for Bill to retire when that could be 5 years from now. And now you're a coach that's much further along in your life and in your age and all that kind of stuff. So I think it got to the point where McDaniels, and from what I understand, Mark Davis wanted McDaniels all along. He actually had to be more persuaded about Ziegler than McDaniels. And McDaniels called up Mark Davis and said, I am interested in the job. Let's make this happen. But you got to take Dave. And Mark Davis said, okay, I'll take you both. Let's do it. And that's ultimately, I think, what put this over the top. And for McDaniels, I find it fascinating because Raiders Nation, from what I understand, is very, very touchy about this right now. I don't think anybody in Vegas or any Raider fan is expecting this to work.
Because of Denver, and they're familiar with what happened in Denver more than a lot of other teams.
Yeah, I would say it's a lot to do with Denver. It's a lot to do with Belichick assistants basically flaming out and failing every place else that they go. But I actually think that Josh McDaniels might get this right this time around. I'm not saying that he's going to win a Super Bowl necessarily, but I think that he has learned a ton about coaching, a ton about running a football team, a ton about himself over this last decade since he's been back with the Patriots. And he's a different guy now than he was back then. And I think he's really gone through, taken his lumps and
Sure.
gone through the process and developed as a coach. But what I find fascinating about it is that a lot of Patriots fans are happy that Josh McDaniels is gone. And I don't know where I fall on this spectrum. I go back and forth in my head about it all the time because on one hand, I do think some fresh ideas
Sure.
and some new influence and something a little bit different could do some good for this offense, because it did get to a point last year where it was awfully stagnant. It was the same it was under Brady. They were trying to get the level of execution consistently up to the par of that same level. And really, the system that Josh McDaniels runs is so complex and has so many moving parts that unless you're at that level of execution, it is very Jekyll and Hyde.
Sure.
Because there's just not, it has to be run properly. It's a system and it has to be run properly. So maybe somebody can come in like a Bill O'Brien and turn it back into more of like a new age offense that we see around the league now, where it's a little bit more simple, where, you know, the Rams are in the Bengals are great examples of this. Those two teams run like 5 plays the whole game.
With 20 different formations out of the play. Yeah, out of those plays, yeah.
But they run the same 5 route combinations in their passing game the entire game.
Yeah.
And the Rams, in particular, have one of the smallest offensive playbooks in the entire NFL. It is a very, very, very simple but complex offense. The complexities, like you said, are in the alignments, the formations, the personnel groupings. But in terms of the actual routes being run, their number one play is Choice Stucco. Choice Stucco is an option route for Cooper Kupp. That's it. They align him up in different spots. They get him into different alignments. They put him off the line of scrimmage and get him free releases. And he goes, he reads the leverage of the defender, he breaks off of it, and he gets open. Choice Stucco. That they probably call that play 10 times a game.
By the way, there's a good example of a guy who I remember when we were doing our draft guide and Dan was deciding where to put Cooper Kupp. Yeah. And he was the first one that told me about him. And then I started looking at him in those FCS playoff games. And I was like,
he's outstanding.
Crap, this guy's good.
Yeah.
And Dan was a little bit hesitant to put him a little bit higher just because he's an FCS guy. And he just didn't feel comfortable going that far. And I remember trying to talk him into it. Hey, if you really feel this guy's good, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead, man. I love this guy. This guy's going to be awesome. And but it just shows you that here's a guy that was available for everybody, basically. And the Rams were able to get him later than anybody would have thought that he would have been available. And just look how good he is. Anyway,
probably the best receiver in football besides maybe Devontae Adams. And they run the same. He runs their same route 20 times a game, and he gets open 10 of them, right? And it's not. So when I look at Josh McDaniels' system here in New England, I look at all of the integrated parts that they're trying to get in. The free agent class from last year, rookie quarterback in Mac Jones. There's clearly going to be more roster turnover this offseason with their skill position players. And maybe a guy like Bill O'Brien, who adds some spread elements, who adds some Alabama-type college schemes, RPOs, that type of thing, simplifies, dumbs it down a little bit, and maybe that iteration of a Patriots playbook can get more out of their first-round wide receiver pick, or can get more out of a Jonnu Smith, or could get more out of a Nelson Aguilar. So I think that that's the biggest thing that I'm hopeful for, is that a different mind, a different viewpoint, a different coach could maybe maximize some of the receiver talent that they do bring in, because it got to the point, and you have to put some of this on McDaniels. You just have to, that N'Keal Harry's development, Jonnu Smith's development, Nelson Aguilar's development and role in the offense, all these guys that they've brought in that weren't Antonio Brown level good, that flamed out so quickly here and just didn't work out. They've got to find a way to maximize the assets a little bit more in the offense and get the premium that they're paying for these players, whether it's in the draft or it's in free agency. So I look at the draft and I say, okay, if they bring in a top receiver that like we all hope that they do, and they draft Garrett Wilson, or they draft Jameson Williams, or they draft Chris Olave, or they draft Treylon Burks, excuse me, then hopefully Bill O'Brien could get more out of that player. Because I guarantee you, if Josh McDaniels was still here, it would be rough. It would be rough.
Is that because of the complexity of the offense?
The complexity of it is a huge part of it, because you have heard so much about this from other guys, that veterans, rookies alike, that the Patriots system just makes you play slow. There's so much thinking involved. There's so many nuances involved where you can run the same play and it can convert into 17 different plays, and that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. Like, based off of the coverage rotation, based off of the everything, it could convert into so many different things, and that causes players to do too much thinking and not be able to just go out there and play fast. And I look at a guy like Kendrick Bourne, who is probably the best receiver that on the team last year. They couldn't get him the ball often enough because he was running the wrong routes and he wasn't in the right place.
Yeah.
So,
and he was the best player receiver on the team.
Right. And at some point in time, you have to say, you know what, Kendrick, just run a dig.
Yeah, right.
I don't care if it's cover 3, if it's cover 2, if it's single high, if it's man-to-man, you are running a dig. That's it. And that is what I hope the Patriots get back to a little bit more. And then there are, in these San Francisco style, Rams, McVay style schemes, even in Cincinnati where they run some of that stuff. Obviously, Zach Taylor, it comes from that tree as well. They have one guy running an option route most of the time. One guy. You have a guy on a choice, and you have everybody else. Yeah, maybe there are some conversions down the field. Like if it's single high, you're not going to run right into the single high safety. You might flatten it out or go across the field or something like that. But those are easy. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like you have total freedom based off of the coverage leverage, and you have to decide where you're going. In those schemes, it's one guy that gets that option. In Kansas City, sometimes they run Y option with Kelsey, but there's not a whole lot of option routes in that offense. Buffalo, same thing. Not a whole lot of option routes in that offense. So the Patriots need to get back to playing fast. They need to get back to playing with more speed and more urgency on offense. And hopefully maybe somebody like a Bill O'Brien can get that out of them.
Is he your number one choice?
I would say it makes the most sense. Obviously, with his history in New England, once upon a time, the Patriots offensive coordinator, the first time that Josh McDaniels left and the Patriots offensive play caller, he was also the architect of the Gronk Aaron Hernandez offense in 2010, 11, and 12. It was Bill O'Brien, not Josh McDaniels, who was the offensive coordinator for those years. And then he goes to Alabama, where he worked a little bit with Mac in the transition from Mac to Bryce Young. And
there you go. That even makes it more...
There's some relationship there. They didn't ever play together. He never coached Mac Jones, but Mac Jones and him taught Mac the playbook, or Mac taught him the playbook is the myth out there. So there's a lot of carryover from Alabama's offense to the Patriots offense. There's obviously a lot of familiarity there. So my ideal offseason for the Patriots is to pull Bill O'Brien out of Alabama, bring him here for Mac Jones, draft John Mechie in the second round, and maybe even draft Slade Bolden on day 3. And let's do this thing, right? Like that's the easiest path.
Sure.
That's the path of least resistance. They could get Patriots about it and draft Treylon Burks or draft Drake London and make it confusing for no goddamn reason.
Yeah.
But the path of least resistance is to draft one of Mac Jones's favorite receivers in John Mechie from his big year at Alabama as the starter, one of his second favorite receiver in Slade Bolden, who I believe Mac and Slade Bolden were roommates at Alabama during Mac's starter season. And then you also go ahead and you get Bill O'Brien from Alabama too, and you turn this into Alabama. That's what the Patriots should be trying to do.
And it's a good idea for Bill O'Brien as well. If he wants to be a head coach in the NFL again, this is the way to do it. Yeah, I know that the Slade Bolden pick is 100% coming, and I know that this is kind of like Hunter Renfrow and Cooper Kupp, like those guys are Patriot guys too. But I gotta think that Mac Jones, if he has any ounce of Belichick's ear. I'm not saying he has influence. I'm saying if he's got any connection there, you gotta draft my guy Slade. Well,
right? Like this,
yeah, especially O'Brien. If O'Brien comes along, then it makes it
right,
that much more logical. And once you get down to the 6th round anyway, in the 7th round, those
right,
guys,
right.
that's where you're trying to find guys like.
Right,
So,
right. That he is. Look, I hate the fact that every single time a Slade Bolden comes around, we say he's Julian Edelman, he's Wes Welker. I think that that's so unfair to Julian Edelman and Wes Welker, who were just such
sure.
great players here, and really are Slade Bolden is not going to be ever as good as Julian Edelman and Wes Welker were. But what I go to is, can he be Danny Amendola, who was not as good as Julian Edelman and Wes Welker, but was still a very productive receiver
Yeah.
in this offense. And I look at that slot position and getting somebody for Mac Jones that can get open quickly in the middle of the formation so he can just get the ball out and not have to stand there and wait for guys and routes to develop down the field. That's when the Patriots offense is at its best, is when the ball's coming out. That's where they want to be a timing, quick rhythm passing game.
Yep.
They don't want to stand there and wait for things to develop and have the quarterback running around like he's Mahomes or Josh Allen. They just want the ball to come out. And if they want the ball to come out, then they got to get guys that get open faster and get open quicker in short areas. And I think Mechie and Slade Bolden are two guys that would definitely fit that bill.
And that'll open things up for Jonnu Smith as well. And we'll find out, is that something that will also benefit the new voice, the new
right,
a little bit changes here and there on the offense, because it can't be any worse after what happened last season. So
yeah, I think the biggest thing, to kind of wrap it up with McDaniels, is you fit into McDaniels' system. The McDaniels system doesn't fit you. Like, you have, if you're N'Keal Harry, if you're Johnny Smith, if you're Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar and Hunter Henry, you are filling a role in Josh McDaniels' offense. And if you can't fill that role, then they'll just find somebody else that's better at it than you are, or try to. The Patriots, I feel like, need to be more adaptive to the skill players in today's game, the receivers in today's game, and making their offense more friendly for those guys to play in it, versus saying, Nelson, you're the X receiver, and Josh McDaniels' offense learn the position. I personally think it needs to be a little bit more of a two-way street there.
And probably why Josh McDaniels is smart enough to know how important it was going to be, that if he was going to leave New England, that he's going to go there with someone that was going to get the players that he needs to have in his system.
I mean, you saw it with Cam Newton. Cam Newton's the passing game that the Patriots ran with Cam Newton, it was the same passing game they ran with Tom Brady. And they said, Cam, turn yourself into Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Like that, it is that Josh McDaniels runs Josh McDaniels' system. Point blank. He is not changing his system for any player, for anyone. Will he amplify one spot versus another because they have a really talented player? Sure. And he'll utilize personnel and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it's a system, it's a machine, and you're plugging a hole. And if you can't plug that hole, we'll swap you out and we'll put somebody else that can. And that's sort of been the mentality for the Patriots. And I don't know if that's really the way that today's offense is the best suited. Like, Matthew Stafford goes to the Rams, and they're not an under center team anymore. They're not a hard bootleg play action team as much as they were with Jared Goff. They play a lot more in gun. They play a lot more in empty. They do a lot more things that are comfortable for Matthew Stafford to do. And that's what I would like to see the Patriots get back to, is throw the scheme out and form something around the guys that they have on their roster that they feel like they're going to build with moving forward.
What is the next step for Patriot fans once they get over this Tom Brady saga? It'll go away in time.
Yeah.
Free agency. Well, look, the East-West game itself is what is tonight, right, or tomorrow night?
The East-West Shrine game.
Today's Tuesday, right? It's tomorrow night, I believe. No, Thursday. Excuse me. Thursday, I believe. Yeah, Thursday night, the East-West Shrine game.
Senior Bowl Saturday. Yeah, that's always a big one. The Patriots since 2008 have drafted 49 Senior Bowl players. They average a 3.5 Senior Bowl guys per season. Last year, Mac Jones, Senior Bowl guy. I believe Barmore was a Senior Bowl guy too, and I think Ramondre Stevenson was the third guy. Year before that, Duggar, Uche, Justin Herron, all Senior Bowl guys. So they love the Senior Bowl. They draft guys from the Senior Bowl every single year. So as I always say, if you're a Patriots fan, watch the Senior Bowl on Saturday, and you're guaranteed to see somebody that will be in a Patriots uniform. At least one guy that will be in a
Yeah.
Patriots uniform come next fall. It's that much of a guarantee.
And then, of course, you're going to have a little bit of a lag, a few weeks, a month before free agency kicks in. But then it really gets fun. Once free agency kicks off, then there's a lot going on between that and the draft, because it's about building your team first with the veterans, and then you know what you have left over. And then that's when your mock drafts change, because you're starting to fill in some of the holes that you thought you were going to fill in with the draft, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of fun. How many picks do the Patriots have?
They have 7.
One every round?
They have one, I believe, in every. They might not have a 6th round pick, or a 5th round pick. It's one of those two. I can pull it up here real fast, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Is that Patriot trade over?
Which one?
The Jet Patriot trade, was that a 1-year thing? That wasn't a carryover?
Yeah, I think that one is done. They lost the pick for another trade that I'm of course blanking on right now, and they got a pick back. I believe they lost the pick in the Trent Brown trade, I think is what it was. They traded a pick to Oakland for that, to Vegas, I should say, for Trent Brown. But yeah, they have a pick in each of the first 3 rounds. They're picking, and I also should mention that the Raiders, I believe, have the pick after the Patriots in each round.
Interesting.
So that's going to be a very interesting little battle there.
Who do you think offensively? Do you think nobody significant could go to the Raiders from New England? Correct.
Not anybody significant, no. I mean, I think that they could. Well, they're obviously not going to bring back Trent Brown to the Raiders. That one was not going to happen again. But I could see a guy like a Ted Karras, for example. Just like a steady offensive lineman. Yeah. The Raiders could use the help there, or maybe a Jawan Bentley if they're going to try to build defense. We'll see who their defensive coordinator is. That'll be a big tell if it's not a Patriot disciple or a Patriot guy.
Who could it be if it was a Patriot?
I don't know. The one guy that I find really interesting with that DC job is Gerard Mayo, because I wonder if Gerard Mayo just wants to get out from underneath the Belichick shadow. Yeah. Not only Bill, but Steve Belichick as well.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And move on from that altogether. Whereas if he goes to the Raiders, builds a good defense with McDaniels in Vegas, now all of a sudden those head coaching interviews become offers, right? Really quickly. So when I look at the Mayo situation here, I say even though it feels a little bit like a lateral move, in Vegas, he gets the DC title, he gets the play calling responsibilities on defense, and he's able to further his career, I think, by going there. And I do think it would clear up some in-house friction, in-house issues with hierarchy on the defensive side of the ball for the Patriots, to be able to have basically it be the Belichick show, Steve and Bill, and not have Gerard Mayo breathing down everybody's neck as another influence in that room. Yeah. So I think in a lot of ways that if it was a Patriot guy, then him bringing Gerard Mayo there actually makes a whole lot of sense.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. It's going to be a lot of fun. By the way, do you think Derek Carr is a Josh McDaniels guy?
I think he would like Derek Carr a lot. Derek Carr is the exact kind of quarterback that McDaniels wants. I think a lot of comparisons from Mac Jones have been Derek Carr over the years, right? As somebody that might not be an elite Patrick Mahomes level quarterback, but is still a top 10, top 15 quarterback, at least by the metrics, and gets the ball out.
Yeah, high accuracy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, to spread the ball around. I think that Derek Carr is exactly what I would be absolutely stunned if the Raiders move on from Derek Carr anytime soon, just because I also believe that Josh McDaniels doesn't want to hitch his wagon to another young quarterback, right? Where he's got to make it work with that guy, or that's it for his coaching career. So I think that's a big thing too. In Denver, drafting Tim Tebow that was it for him. So I think that that's another thing that you got to look at, is that I don't believe that McDaniels is going to want to say, Sam Howell. My whole coaching career depends on me making Sam Howell good in the NFL.
Sure, I get
I
that.
don't think that was really what the goal was there.
Yeah, and there's no reason to do that, especially because Derek Carr loves the organization. He wants to stay there, and
Right.
why not? And by
Yeah.
the way, I could see the if and there still will be good receivers left on the board. I could see that just as the Patriots are about to pick with the Raiders there, that
Oh
both
yeah.
of those teams are going to want wide receivers. So
Yeah.
that could be
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, so the Patriots don't have a fifth or a seventh round pick, but they have two sixth round picks. So they
Okay.
have a first, second, third, fourth, and two sixths. So they have 6 picks total, and they're not getting any comp picks back, obviously, because they spent like crazy in free
Yeah.
agency last year. So those are their 6 picks, but I'm sure that they will move around the board plenty and
Sure.
play the game as they always do.
And your coverage, you are going. What are you still? What's your schedule now in the off season?
Yeah, we're still doing 2 shows a week, Tuesday and Thursday on Patriots Press Pass, Patriots Beat, and we'll be doing anything we can get our hands on, in the off season when it comes to draft, free agency, Senior Bowl, combine, whatever is newsworthy or noteworthy, we'll be there to cover it.
All right, Evan. Great job as always. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you real soon.
Sounds good, Greg. Thanks.